Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're going to do some more colonization. In fact, I've come to the conclusion we've been doing it all wrong. For instance, in one of our first attempts, we dropped Jack died on Ariel and then sort of left, leaving no rocket or any sort of lifeline for Jack to rely upon in case things get tough. While we're over here on Ariel, I wanted to show you another little update that we've done. We went through the painstaking process and starting to slowly put all of these insulated tiles down. The good news though is I can report this entire shaft is actually traversable without even having a suit on. Even when I had gotten rid of all the obsidian, I was realizing there was just too many abyssalite breaks in this area, and so that heat was still seeping in. So my earlier attempt at allowing the hydrogen and the oxygen to sort of fill this dig shaft up to cool it down just wasn't making any progress. But now if Jack ever needs something and we throw a payload at their targeting beacon, they'll be able to go up and get it. So Jack's going to be doing okay. But over in our home colony, we have a new colony rocket design. No need for the diamond drill cone, and we've installed a couple of extra solar panel modules with the available space that we got from deconstructing it. We also have a rover's module and a trailblazer module. We've dropped off 300,000 calories worth of berry sludge, and I think we're gonna bring in a little bit more oxalite. Let's pack this rocket with 20 tons. And that shouldn't be too bad because we have 10 tons already on the colony, and I think we're going to go into oxalite creation overdrive. This way, this rocket's going to be able to survive on that planetoid for as long as possible, and at least give us an opportunity to get that colony fully functional before and if ever we send this rocket back home. Because the great thing about rockets is, even though this platform did hold the ESS Susan and this platform did hold the Virgo, those rockets don't own them. For instance, even though those two rockets are out in space, we could start creating a new rocket right now. And in this way, you could start sending rockets everywhere, and as long as you didn't get in sort of a traffic jam over on the home colony, everything's going to be okay. Our destination is going to be Eugito. Eugito is the swampy planetoid, so I believe this is the place that's going to have the tree. But even better, it also has a tungsten volcano. And tungsten's one of the ingredients we need to make some beautiful thermium. And that's when things can get really crazy. And if you didn't know why, it's because things made out of thermium have a plus 900 degrees Celsius overheat temperature. So Eugito is definitely going to be the destination of that colonization rocket. But first, let's check on our friends over on Frostine. We're actually starting to get our backlog of polluted water finally, and because of that, the oxygen condition is looking a lot better here. But there are some other updates to fill you in on. Remember how I told you I wish these were two separate systems? Well, voila! I got tired of having water coming out of this both above 5 degrees and below 5 degrees, which was necessary for the growth of our bristle blossoms and our sleet wheat, so we just split it into two liquid chillers. The water now comes in from the desalinator and splits it off into two directions. One thermoaqua tuner is responsible for keeping these metal plates at around 1 degree. The other is responsible for keeping this set of metal plates at 10 degrees. So the water comes in and it gets checked. As long as the bristle blossom water is below 25, it continues on to the buffer tanks. If it's not, it gets re-added to the system to be chilled again. Same way for the sleet wheat, although it does have to go through an additional time typically, because we're looking for that water to be below 2.5 degrees. Once it is, it also gets added to their buffer tanks. And eventually, this will result in a complete 50-50 split. Because yeah, it may not look like it right now, and as you can see, the bristle blossoms have 7.5 tanks of buffer, whereas the sleet wheat only has about 2.5 tanks. But remember, once all these buffer tanks are full, this is going to become backed up, and no more water is going to be thrown to the bristle blossom side, and all that water is going to be waiting to go over to sleet wheat. This is the first complete activity period that we've tried out this system, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what it can do. We don't go dormant with the saltwater geyser responsible for providing the water for those systems for another 18.5 cycles. We also took advantage of our new supply of supercoolant, sent some of it over, and upgraded these coolant loops to supercoolant to make them that much more efficient. Although I could have done a much better job filling this line. But as you can imagine, this was a pretty big job, and it took quite some time in the background. But this was only the beginning of the chain of events to make sure this was successful. Because as you can see, we don't have a lot of power on this colony. We already added a bunch of solar panels, but that still wasn't going to be enough to run 2 thermal aquatuners. Luckily for us, they're not always going to have to run so much. Once these buffer tanks get full, everything's going to be able to back up, and the thermal aquatuners are going to have no problems getting these metal tiles down to temps. But for now, we have them fairly aggressively set at 1 degree and 10 degrees. So where are we getting the rest of the power? Because yeah, we have a little bit of hydrogen power that is responsible for our oxygen. We also have some wood burning power coming from the lumber produced by these arbor trees. The issue is those are all on separate grids, which is something I'll be looking to change in the future. But hey, one project at a time, right? This is what we created to add a little bit more power to the colony. Allow me to introduce you to the mini geothermal power plant. As you can see, we have 20 kilos of steam pressure in here, and it backs up right to a metal tile door system, and it's connected to the obsidian that's sitting in the magma biome. Now don't worry, that geothermal power plant is not the one responsible for turning all this magma into igneous rock. Remember, we had some earlier abyssalite breaks, and until we caught them, it injected a lot of chill into this biome. But now we're just slowly drawing out the power. We don't need much. We have this thermal sensor set on 180 degrees and the steam turbines connected to a smart battery. That way, whenever we need power, it tells the steam turbines to turn on, and it creates about 1600 watts. Whenever it gets too cool inside this area, this door is going to shut, drawing in a lot of heat from the biome, heating up the steam, in which then the steam turbine does its magic. But the last thing I could afford to do was put a thermal aquatuner in here to be able to actively cool these steam turbines. Well, we had a dumb idea, and we're not quite sure if it's going to work yet. We have a passive cooling loop. As you can see, this loop of liquid pipes is just transferring around water from one side of this area to the other. Now, the idea, when this carbon dioxide geyser finally turns on, and we've been waiting quite some time for it to do that, it'll start erupting with boiling liquid carbon dioxide. And despite how that sounds, this geyser produces that boiling carbon dioxide at minus 55 degrees, which will really cool this area down. Hopefully enough to where this water will pick up enough of its chill and then drop the chill off in front of the steam turbines. Because as it stands, they're at about 70 degrees. And as most of you may know, once a steam turbine gets up over 100 degrees, they don't function well. Everything in here is locked in with the insulated tiles except this manual airlock, which yes, we are losing a little bit, but I needed some way for the duplicants to get in here, just in case we need to do some maintenance. We also have this airflow tile here, which is also transferring temperature, just because we have this gas pump here, which is responsible for taking all the carbon dioxide that this thing's going to produce and sending it off to space. Now remember, the gas is not going to be as strong as the liquid, so as soon as this geyser erupts, I'm fairly confident that carbon dioxide is very quickly going to turn back into a gas, and so we're not at risk for this water to freeze inside the pipes. But hopefully, as that cold gas travels down through here, we pick up enough of that chill to ultimately cool down the steam turbines. I'll update you in a little while and see if this system actually works, but the goal was to provide powerless cooling using the environment. The NX-01 Enterprise is almost ready. We have 16 tons of oxalite and our 300 calories worth of berry sludge. And the question is, who are we sending over to Yujito? Well, after looking at it, the Enterprise has always been John Archer's rocket, so it doesn't feel right sending that rocket away without them. Plus, they'll be able to do a little bit of the field research required on that planetoid, so we'll see how that goes. Next, we're going to be sending Carol. The reason why we're sending Carol is twofold. One, because every colonization rocket attempt is going to need a dupe that can dig through all the materials present on that new planetoid. But also because we believe the tree's going to be on that planetoid, there's going to be a big requirement for mechatronics engineering. Now, the one thing is, Carol here is also a plumber, so their morale requirement is up at 18. John Archer's is only 12. So while I think John Archer's 12 is okay, I don't know if we can get away with the 18 morale requirement of Carol. And let me show you why. The Enterprise is equipped with a mess hall and a barracks. That gives us 4 morale. Additionally, they're going to be eating berry sludge. Berry sludge is going to give us another +8 to morale, and so far, that gives us 12 morale. But if we click on an average dupe, you can see we also get the +1 morale for just being a duplicant, and they also get a morale bonus for however long their break during the day is. Plus, we also have to remember they get a morale bonus for learning skills that they're actually interested in. So while I think Carol would be okay at 18, I don't want to take a chance with it, so I think we're going to skill scrub them, remove super duper hard digging for now, and remove the plumbing requirement. And yes, they are interested in these, but remember, they only get +1 for each skill that they learn that they're interested in. So yeah, you may get 1 morale back for learning plumbing. It actually costs you more morale to learn it because it's that tier 2 skill. So let's go ahead and shaken, not stirred Carol and get them skill scrubbed. But it also means that we're sending away 2 more dupes. So because of that, we've been looking for more dupes in the printing pod once again. And that is where we found Hassan. Hassan has some great colonization interests. They're good at both researching, digging, and cooking. Their only negative is that they're a shabby dresser. So I thought they were a perfect candidate for future colonization missions. With all that being said, welcome to the colony, HP Fangirl 22. They're going to be spending most of their time in the duplicant gym, training for a future colonization mission. Finally, another thing I wanted to update you guys on was the ridiculousness of this gold volcano. If you remember, it sort of kept producing, because as we've kind of learned, it looks like gold just has a very high density when it's in its liquid form. For instance, each one of these tiles has about 10 tons worth of gold in it. And while I am deathly scared of releasing any of this carbon dioxide or the 2000-degree gold sitting inside of it, we eventually have to tackle this beast. And I've got a decent idea, but step 1 means I have to get rid of this carbon dioxide. So I'm thinking I might be able to corner build bricks in here and just destroy it. As we're getting ready to throw some tiles in here, we have to consider what we're actually going to build them out of, because not too many substances can withstand 2000 degrees. But you'll notice the insulated tile actually touching still only sitting at 216 degrees, even though it has a melting point of 1409. Now, if we waited a few thousand cycles, this insulated tile would eventually burn up. But because its thermal conductivity is so low and it's insulated, it doesn't have a lot of opportunity to transfer that heat. Well, that was a fool's errand. I failed to remember that because this is part of the actual volcano, while it looks like those tiles are empty, you can't build anything there. What if we raised this up a little bit, allowing the carbon dioxide to rise and thus the gold to rise? We might be able to deconstruct these insulated tiles once the carbon dioxide is there. All right, so we're able to destroy these 2 tiles, which is a good step. I really want to destroy this one, and that way this liquid, which I think is the one responsible for making this overpressured, will separate and it might keep erupting. Question is, how do we destroy it? We could do something silly like deconstruct this one, and then hurry up and build another insulated tile here, but I don't think that's a very good idea. And look at that. When the igneous rock melted, it turned into magma, which then rose. Now we can rebuild the insulated tiles, and it'll destroy that carbon dioxide, which will give us an opportunity to make a complete vacuum. And isn't that a thing of beauty? Give me a little while to try to work on this. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be stupid. It's going to be the exact type of thing we do on this channel. The good news is Carol is fresh as the day they were printed, so we can go back in. We'll make them the mechatronics engineer, and we're also going to give them 2 slots into digging, and now they only have a morale requirement of 12. A couple of updates for you, considering I just realized I spent the last, 45 minutes with my microphone muted, and I have no idea where I left you off. We're getting this coolant loop finished, and once it is, we're going to be able to keep this little blob of supercoolant cool. We're then going to put a temperature shift plate right here and start to draw out all of the heat from this area, hopefully causing all this gold to turn into debris form. Now, it's probably going to end up taking a diamond temperature shift plate, and hopefully the supercoolant can do a good enough job of absorbing the heat before the temperature shift plate spreads it out throughout the atmosphere. We've also finished draining all of the polluted water that used to be here, with it all being fed to the trees or sieved to create more water here for research and that sort of stuff. Of course, we're kind of done with research, so all it is really now is an oxalate storage tank. So considering that we don't have much room on this planetoid, recovering this space is going to be great. Question is, what do we do with it now? If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. Over on the star map, the ESS Susan has finished their exploration mission over here. And you can see they've done a great job, and we now have full visibility on the east side of the map. We also stopped by this forested ore field to grab some of its goodies to include its artifact and are now heading home. The NXL-1, loaded up with Carol and John, are doing a great job heading towards Eugito. For appropriate record keeping, they started with about 275,000 calories worth of berry sludge. They also have over 16 tons of oxalite, so they'd be able to stay in this rocket for quite some time. Unfortunately, I failed to take the rocket out of grounded status, and so Carol had an accident because I did not allow them to use the wall toilet. That's my bad. Unfortunately, we have another issue, and this episode is no longer about going to find the tree. Alice and Honeywell inside the Virgo are stranded. Now, I am 99% sure that I made sure they were chock full on oxidizer and fuel. But according to this tool tab, it says we're out of oxidizer. And I know it wasn't anything with the destination, because if you remember, they had a range of 30. We sent them out to about here and then sent them back after they had revealed all this with the telescope. And you can also tell that they had enough fuel to do that. So either A, I completely forgot to fill one of the oxidizer tanks, which, let's be honest, that could have happened, but I'm really sure they had a range of 30 before they left. So I'm not 100% sure that this is not a bug. So the Enterprise is now going to be going on a rescue mission. As soon as they get into orbit of Eugito, we're going to drop off rover, head back home to pick up another rover, and then head over to Frizola. And here's why. When we click abandoned ship on the Virgo, all of the debris from the ship and Allison's escape pod are going to go towards the nearest planetoid. Now here's where it's risky. I'm assuming that Oxygen Not Included knows that Frizola is the closest planetoid. It is only 2 tiles until its orbit, whereas the Fladina is at least 3 tiles to its orbit. So once we get over here and land that rocket, we can then click abandon ship. All of that debris and hopefully Allison in the safety of their escape pod will come land on this planetoid, to which we will have a rocket ready to rescue Allison and hightail them back home. Incidentally, I think we've also found the temporal tear opener. By clicking on the radiation overlay here, you can see there's a radiation input, which is what I recognize the temporal tear opener being. We're going to have to see. To get this underway, we're going to go ahead and deploy rover's module on Eugito. I'd like to put the rocket in the corner, but I'm not 100% sure what is over here yet. But putting the rocket in the corner kind of keeps that exhaust tucked away. Guessing that this is the tree area because of the tiles, I think we will be okay with putting the rocket here. So let's go ahead and land rover here and see what kind of options we have. Oh, look at this. This is beautiful, but I definitely don't want to land the rocket over all this polluted water. But we do have significant amount of clearance to the ceiling. We will deconstruct rover's lander, which is going to recoup some of that steel, and maybe we can get in here and build some insulated tiles to absorb some of that heat. But it looks like this is not going to be a problem at all. We have a nice geyser here. I'm assuming the tree is right here. Temperatures are okay. But with all this algae, it looks like we'll be fine by using an oxygen diffuser for quite some time. While rover's busy doing that, let's get the Enterprise home. We have a rescue mission. We've also have this loop complete, so let's turn this thermal aqua tuner back on, and we're going to say 15 degrees. We'll let that supercoolant cool for a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and put down our diamond temperature shift plate. This coolant is already down to 15 degrees, so here goes nothing. I don't enjoy spending 800 kilos worth of diamond on diamond temperature shift plates, but we are up over 4 tons. And just to show you, the melting point for a diamond is 3,900 degrees, and it has a thermal conductivity of 80, so it makes it a perfect material for this application. Now, whether or not this coolant loop can keep up with the draw of temperature from the volcano, that's something that remains to be seen. Oh dear goodness, this was a bad idea. The supercoolant completely flashed. Where we messed up is the vaporization point of supercoolant is 436 degrees. I really should have known better, right? Now, that diamond temperature shift plate is doing a phenomenal job spreading all that heat into the atmosphere. Step 1 is destroying the temperature shift plate and then attacking this problem from a different angle. The great thing is the supercoolant just turns into a supercoolant gas. So what if we put the supercoolant in there and then locked it into place? If at first you don't succeed, fail, fail, and fail again. Ladies and gentlemen, I just got out of an extensive meeting with the lead rep for the dupe workers union. Apparently the duplicants are tired of risking their lives in the performance of their duties. Here at Echo Ridge Gaming, safety is our #1 priority, and so we're vowing to put in some additional safety protocols to make sure that the dupes can live a happy and safe life. Which is why we've installed a new safety-oriented sign that'll track how many cycles it's been since our last injury. And being that we actually have no duplicants in the hospital at this time tells me we can start the counter. Doing a check-in on Allison, who's stranded in the middle of the star map. They still have 129 cycles worth of berry sludge, but only 887 kilos worth of oxalite. So I think the oxalite's going to be the limiting factor. And just because you have to abandon ship, that doesn't count as a workplace injury, right? Because it's already been 1 cycle since a workplace injury. And we don't want to ruin the streak, do we? In fact, after checking with the corporation's lawyers, as long as Allison is not injured in the escape pod, we get to keep our streak. But we're a good company, so whenever this counter reaches 100, we'll give the duplicants a half a day off. I mean, isn't that generous? And in case you've never seen one of these counters, let me quickly go over the automation. Whenever a signal counter receives a green signal in this input, it increases its number value. Whenever it reaches its max value, which here it's 10, it resets it down to 0, and we use that automation to send a green signal to the next signal counter. So it'll go from 9 on this signal counter to 10 total, because it'll be a 1 here and a 0 here. And then the same setup for these 2 signal counters. It can be a little awkward getting the automation wires around, but this works kind of well. We have a signal switch here. In the rare case that there is a workplace injury, we'll be able to send a reset and it resets them all to 0. I had a cycle counter in here, but I didn't like the fact that I couldn't reset it right when the new cycle hits. So right when we hit over 1445, I'm going to reset this timer again so that it's only going to increment at the beginning of a new cycle. To highlight this functionality, pretend we're about to reset over into another cycle, and you can see that it increments up just fine. And here's the example of what happens after it gets to 9, sends the green signal over, and now it's displaying 10. But we know it's supposed to say 2 at the beginning of the next cycle, so as soon as we get that pleasant little chime, I'll reset it, and then we'll already be 2 cycles in without a workplace injury. Oh, don't mind Patrick. That was a previous workplace injury. And look at that. I told you we valued safety. Speaking of safety, we're going for our 3rd, maybe 4th attempt here. And I think this one has the best chances of succeeding. We've now loaded this up with 910 kilos worth of supercoolant, so it'll have a lot more thermal mass to absorb. And we're also going to lock it in with some insulated tiles. The last thing we're going to do is take that diamond temperature shift plate, put it right in the middle, and then seal this whole thing off. And that way, none of the temperature will be escaping into the atmosphere, and this coolant loop will slowly drain all of the heat out of here. At least, that's the theory, right? So apparently we can't corner build temperature shift plates, but we can corner build tiles. Sure, I'll buy it. So it's going to take a little bit longer to seal this thing up, but no big deal, we'll still get it sealed up. Now the key is going to be closing it up before all that supercoolant flashes. So we'll automatically start those up. We have an emergency on this insulated tile because we understand that the supercoolant's going to flash. We just want it to wait until this insulated tile is finished, so everything stays in here. Supercoolant is going up in temperature rather quickly. 65, 70. Duplicants, please hurry. Just this once. We're now rounding 215 degrees. As a reminder, we have all the way until 436. Oh no, I've got bad news. It's Queen Calero that's gonna be... Nope. Queen Calero is just dropping off the materials. JM Mort! Finish that brick! Some of the supercoolant's already flashing. Okay, so it's been a disaster, but we at least have 670 kilos worth of supercoolant sitting inside this box. We can now completely seal it up, and yes, it'll take some time, but eventually this little system here should take all of the heat out of here. Unless, of course, this tile becomes a vacuum. Why don't we put some oxygen in there or something, huh? I suppose if we deconstruct this brick, there'll always be supercoolant or a supercoolant gas in these tiles. And the supercoolant gas can get as hot as we need it to. Well, I guess it's time to reset the counter and force one of these duplicants to be discharged early. Man, I was really hoping that wouldn't happen. Well, the good news is we found something to do with all this extra space, and it's a hospital overflow. And we'll just go ahead and keep the reset signal on until all the duplicants are healthy again. The better news, though, is we got this done. And for the record, if the duplicants would have finished these tiles before that supercoolant would have heated up, we would have been fine. Unfortunately, now we have a small problem because so much heat was ejected into the environment. But with this supercoolant going around and around and the supercoolant gas able to have contact with this, we can see that the gold is already down to 1100 degrees. This thermal aqua tuner is going to be working overtime though, as you can see by the 100% that it's been running this cycle. But right now the coolant is coming in around 46, 47 degrees, and it's leaving at about 70, so it is drawing in quite a bit of heat. The NX-01 is ready for its rescue mission, so let's get it crewed up and go save Allison. Our system down here is working, although I would add this into the category of things Echo has shown me not to do. The supercoolant has reached about 140 degrees, the gas itself about 440. We've managed to get the gold down to about 1000 degrees, so we're getting better. The good thing though is we're getting to the point where that supercoolant is going to keep solidifying when it hits about 434 degrees, which is really going to help it start driving down that temperature. Which it's good too, because the supercoolant in the loop is causing these steam turbines to be too hot, the environment around them to be too hot, which means our industrial sauna is no longer cooling. This is how you ruin colonies. But fear not, we have a plan. One rescue rocket on its way. I mean, you really do have to commend the colony for putting in this attention to safety device here, which has really helped to drive down the safety incidents on the colony. Over on Eugito, Rover made some good progress. We're able to scoop up the top of this planetoid, and we've gathered all the slime and put it inside this storage bin, and that way it'll continuously off-gas and creating an atmosphere. Unfortunately, when Rover shut down, he shut down in the path of the doorway, which means all that oxygen is just being dumped into the vacuum of space. Like, of all the places to shut down, Rover. So we've made some progress. We're able to corner build tiles in here, so whenever we do, that new tile comes in with 400 kilos worth of cooler material, and so far we've caused all this gold to solidify. I mean, isn't it gorgeous? Now the supercoolant is really getting an opportunity to start cooling this down even further. Somehow there's supercoolant in the middle here, off to the side, and then gold that wraps around it. Just some very weird mechanics based on something you don't often see. Our rescue ship is now orbiting Frizola, which is good news because we're down to 235 kilos worth of oxalite for Allison. So we definitely have some work to do, and we need to do it fairly quick. First, let's deploy Rover. I think in this case, it's going to be on this side because of the ceiling. You can see here, this is 35 tiles exactly from the ceiling. So this one would be even shorter. And with a rocket height of 35, we're going to be hard pressed. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to land Rover here, dig down a few tiles, and then deconstruct the module. You can hear Rover already barking. Good boy. All right, step one, deconstructing the lander, and then we'll start digging. Oh, no. So if the rocket is here, that means everything has to fit right here. And that's only 33 tiles, and yet Rover can't dig into that. You know what, though? Our other duplicant will be able to, so we'll let Rover do what they can, and then once we're further along, we'll land our digger. The good news, this is all granite, so we'll have plenty of building materials, but we definitely can't leave the duplicant here, but we'll try to get a mini pod down before we leave. It is just way too cold for just about everything here, with the average temps sitting around -40. Look at that, Rover gave her a nice landing spot. This is going well. We're now at 37 tiles. We'll do one more just for good measure and put our rocket platform down just like this. Now the best we have as far as building materials is probably the granite as far as temperature resistance. So we'll go ahead and check. Sedimentary rock can go up to 926 degrees, which means the engine would instantly melt it. Granite only goes to 668, so we're going to use the sedimentary rock and just hope for the best. We need this to be able to get Carol back into the rocket as soon as possible. We've also queued up some digging commands here. That way, if Allison lands over here in the escape pod, they'll quickly be able to get into the rocket before they suffocate in the vacuum of space. Carol and Rover make such a good team. We're already ready to land the Enterprise. And look at that. There is our 1 tile worth of clearance that we predicted. And here comes the rocket. Things are actually looking up in this episode. In here, we have to make sure that the atmosuit checkpoint is vacant. By redelivering that suit, Carol's like, no, I can't go in there. It says vacancy only. So we're just going to drop this suit and treat it as a spare. Only John or Carol will be able to come in or out because we only have the 1 dock, but that should be fine. All right, step 1 is complete. Carol is safe, and we have a beautiful rocket sitting on Frizola. And now we have to do something that I've never done before, and that's click Abandon Ship. Allison does have a suit here, so we are going to make sure that they're in their suit before we hit the Abandon Ship button. And here we go. Oh, you have to click it twice. Confirm Abandon Ship. Very nice. And the rocket has exploded and all the debris is flying. Now here's the question. If I had an escape pod, why couldn't we just use the escape pod to get to the planetoid and leave the rocket intact? We only have 88 seconds left until Allison should be arriving, and it does indicate that they are heading towards Frizola. So on Frizola, we're going to see what we can do while we wait. I mean, I suppose we can dig down to start with. We'll put a nice door there so we don't let any of the carbon dioxide escape, I guess. Of course, this door is going to have to be built out of uranium ore. That's never good. And then we're going to try digging over. We're going to need a couple more ladders. See if we can scope out what I believe is the temporal terra opener. And look at this. We get the duplicate crash landed message. And there they are in their cute little escape pod. Good to note, we can actually recover 100 kilos worth of steel from the escape pod. We have a bunch of rocket debris here. We're going to go ahead and empty that storage. Oh, this is perfect. We're going to be able to get 100% of our materials back. And before we forget, we'll allow Allison to be a part of the crew. Look at this. We're a big happy family. We even have the pet robot dog. Another note, Rover can unpack debris. And then we're going to sweep everything we can up and bring it with us. Waste not, want not, I like to say. Apparently one of the items that comes with it is the fuel that was left inside the rocket. I mean, that's a pretty cool touch, but don't ask me how you'd self-destruct a rocket and keep all the petroleum intact. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to allow us to see through here by digging these open. It may. We may have to keep going and dig down through here to give a bioscan on the security door. Then I think we're going to open this area up right here and put a mini pod. There is a smidge worth of oxygen here, but not enough to where I'd feel comfortable printing out a dupe. While the duplicates are busy working on that, we've actually made a lot of headway. We kept putting in tiles at different locations, and now we have the gold volcano finally down to about 50 degrees. It's taken a lot. We also had to keep dropping off ice here in the steam turbines so that they could keep running, but it had the positive effect of also reducing the temperature of the supercoolant, which really helped. I think also the addition of this metal tile also helped because it can hold more temperature than the little supercoolant gas that was sitting here. So now we're breaking into here. We have our naphtha lock. This is all a vacuum. It's still a little warm over here, but the duplicates are okay. The last thing we need to do, just break into this way, let that supercoolant flow down, mop it up, and then we should have a complete vacuumed out area to where we can work in and get everything set up. But I think that's going to be the subject of another episode. And there it is, the temporal tear opener. Dun dun dun! So this is a long ways to go, but long story short, you put 1,000 rad bolts into this thing, it shoots a giant laser, horrible things happen, and the temporal tear opens. So all we have left to do now is drop off our mini pod, and I think we'll be good to go. Looks like we even have a vending machine here. Probably some delicious nutrient bars that whenever a dupe does come here, they'll start off with a little bit of food. Of course, look at these stacks of sleet wheat. There's 162 in each of these piles, and they're everywhere. Here's one 144. With all 3 of the duplicates loaded up, it is time to head home. But now it's telling me that the rocket only has a range of 8. Something's definitely bugging out. This is only 10 tiles away from Frizola to Eugenia, and that rocket, I confirmed, had a range of 20 tiles. My only guess is they've started charging for the taking off and landing, even though we didn't see that out of some of the other rocket types. For instance, the carbon dioxide rocket. And the horrible thing is this rocket is only going to be able to go 8 tiles, which is going to put it in orbit of Neutralina. And Neutralina doesn't do anything for us because there's nothing and nobody there. We also have Aquazon as an option. Again, no rocket platforms there. Our best bet is Frostalin, because Frostalin is our colony that's connected via teleporters. In fact, it looks like we can make it all the way to Frostalin, as it only has a range of 8, and then we'll build a rocket platform here, get the rocket refueled, and then finally send it on home. But that means we're going to need petroleum and oxalite delivered to this colony. But that's a story for another episode. And look at this on our home colony. It's been 10 whole cycles until we've had a safety incident. Great job, dupes. I hope you enjoyed the ridiculousness that was this episode and learned a lot of things on how not to play Oxygen Not Included. In the end, though, we made it through, and we still have all of our duplicates. That's a pretty big win in my book. So until next time, I'll talk to you soon.